So I just wanted to take up a little bit of your time today to talk about a game that I've been playing quite a bit. Now, this game has come out about 5 months ago. So yeah, it's not super new, but it's new enough that I think enough people haven't really talked about it. I haven't seen a lot of coverage on it. So I thought, well, what the heck, I'll talk about it. This game is called Rogue Waters, and it is at its core a very simple game with a recipe that most of us will be familiar with. Whether you're a fan of strategy RPGs or roguelites, you'll at least be familiar with one of the main mechanics of the game, as it takes strategy RPG and marries it to a very, very forgiving roguelite experience. And I do think it probably deserves the title roguelite and not roguelike, just because of how forgiving it really is. And if I'm being honest, this game could be a little bit more difficult. I think a number of people who are big fans of the difficulty of a roguelike are going to have some issues with the fact that it's not as difficult as it could be. But I also think that that opens the door for other newcomers to actually try the game without feeling like they might waste their money on a game that they're going to be unable to fully play through. But don't worry, it's not like a walk in the park. This game does have some difficulty spikes, and there are some definite reasons why it is a roguelite. So I figured let's sit down and talk about Rogue Waters. But before we do, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps my channel grow, and that's the only way I value my own worth. Anyway, Rogue Waters is a game, like I said, is relatively simple when it comes to the mechanics of the gameplay, the combat, or even the navigation. But one part where this game does kind of lose me, though, is honestly the story. It doesn't make a lot of sense all the time, but it's kind of okay because it's a pirate story. You control Captain Cutter, where on your first mission, you're actually working with your captain, Captain Blackbone, as he is trying to find this super rare jewel or gem, and once you do, for some reason, you shove it in your eye socket. And the part that really confuses me, though, is the fact that the captain was looking for this and then he turns on you and basically says, "Give me that jewel back," even though it's like sticking in your brain halfway and is fully enveloped in your skull. But apparently, Captain Blackbone has been like searching for this thing for years, has killed many of Sailor, and you're confused as to why he wants to kill you for it. Now, it's in your head. He knows where it's at. He has killed countless people. Why are you confused that he's going to kill you for it? You had it and shoved it in your eyeball. That's the part that doesn't really make sense. But anyway, he does, in fact, kind of kill you. Luckily, though, the jewel that you shoved in your eye isn't just only a jewel. It's actually probably what possessed you to shove it in your eye, as it is its own entity itself and ended up bringing you back to life. And it just so happens that now that you're back and you're with your crew, they are also kind of immortal. They can't die either. And while you're on your raids or looking for Captain Blackbone, if you all do perish, you just kind of return to the hub. For the most part, no one more worse for the wear, and in fact, you get to keep everything that you found on your raid, including your experience points. You see, the hub is an incredibly important part of the game, because this is where you can spend your experience points, your influence, and your blueprints. These are all different currencies that you get while playing the game. Your influence, if you will, can do a couple of things. You can basically upgrade parts of your ship with it, or you can actually recruit new members to your team, which is really important pretty early on. So I will talk about that here in a second. But your experience points also kind of work as just a skill point, if you will, and you get to level it up every few runs. Sometimes if you have a particularly long run, you will get 2 levels up, but that's really rare that that happens. But for the most part, you're going back to use your blueprints, to use your influence, and you're able to upgrade your team, your ship, and your weapons, and then go back out on another raid. And these are procedurally generated, so you're not able to like go back to the same one that you died on unless you're doing the story. But even then, the stories do change it up a little bit. It's the same key events and landmarks and whatever, but they also change up what enemies you'll encounter. And there is not a lot at the beginning, by the way. In fact, like the first half of the game, most of the enemies are all the same to a certain extent. There are different buffs that they can apply thanks to their ship, and there's different like levels that they're going to be at. Now, when I say different buffs and stuff that they can apply using their ship, you can actually do the same thing as well. It's just part of the things that you're going to build with your blueprints, or even items that you can find while you're out on a raid. These things can be applied to your ship. Unfortunately, you have a limited capacity for these buffs, and so you're kind of picking and choosing between what you want. As you start the game, you are granted the ones that give your crewmates 1 HP, like an extra HP, and the captain 2 HP. Now, these actually stuck with me for quite a while, just because some of the ones I got were nice, like, hey, you have an extra attack, but it takes away that 2 extra HP on the captain, and you're only granted at the beginning like 3. Like, so 3 HP and having like 25% of that just applied because of a buff, that's pretty major. So you will see different enemies that have multiple buffs, and you'll run into some more difficult enemies, but they're all pretty much the same as far as their actual abilities. Now, combat is relatively simple, and it also involves your ship, as your first encounter is usually with cannons. So you're basically lined up with the enemy ship or their fortress, and you're able to have a few shots with your cannons. Now, this is really important because you can take out their cannons and have a few other opportunities to then shoot their actual enemies themselves, or you can shoot the equipment that they have that's giving them the buffs. All of those things are strategies that you can use, but this only lasts for 2 to 3 rounds, and then you actually jump on their ship, and then this is where you have that grid-based strategy combat that many of us are very familiar with. And in this, it's relatively simple, pretty straightforward. You do have a number of skills and items you can use. Most of the items are one-time per battle uses, and you can also actually summon a kraken. Apparently, the jewel that you stuck in your head gave you the ability to communicate with the kraken. You also kind of save him early on in the game, so anyway, he helps you every now and then, but there again, far and few between. For the most part, most characters are just going to have melee attacks. And this is sort of trading, like a tit for tat sort of experience, where you're going to only do like so much damage, and the enemy is going to return that same damage. Sometimes if they have an armor that's really high, you just won't penetrate that armor. So most of actual combat really depends upon placement and where you're at. You see, you have this knockback ability when you attack an enemy. If they knock back against another character or like a wall or something, it does extra damage. Or you can even knock them over the ship. You know, these two methods are basically the best in melee combat. You can overpower enemies, you can apply debuffs, and you can kind of take them out that way, but especially early on, just getting them close to the side of the ship and basically pushing them off is the best route to go. Quick side note, I just listened to that and it sounded like that's basically the only way that you have hand-to-hand combat, and that's not true. There's just a few enemies, and they're just prevalent and they really annoy you, that have this extra armor. I apologize for any confusion about that. I was just like re-listening to this as I was editing, and I was realizing I did not actually express the fact that, oh, there's a ton of enemies that just take damage like anyone else, and you're just going back and forth. You can even have counter attacks to your character. There is more to the melee combat than having to just push them over the ship. I was just sort of overemphasizing that because those were the most frustrating enemies, especially early on, that I ran into outside of the actual bosses. And there would be sometimes some ships that you would just come across and everyone would have all this extra armor. So I was just emphasizing that, and probably too much. And also, I wanted to say there are long range attackers as well. They just tend to be slower and basically glass cannons. So they have their good points, but they're also relatively weak. But if you played a strategy RPG game, you'll do just fine with this. And the one thing I do like about it is you can bring like 3 to 4 crewmates into a battle, and if they die and you have others in reserve, you can bring them out too. So you can use your entire crew in a battle, which would always drive me insane in like RPGs, where you would have like a giant cast of characters, and yet for some reason only 4 would be able to fight, or 3, and once they go down, then like it's over. Well, what are the other guys doing? They're just standing there. They should jump in. So anyway, I do like the fact that they did that. I'll also say navigation. The maps in this game are super, super simple. There is really no navigation. You're just kind of choosing a path and the game pushes you forward. For the most part, though, what I really loved about this game was the fact that it, I think for me anyway, hits a perfect spot with that roguelike. It did enough where, yeah, it was difficult at times, and I really did appreciate going back to the base and being able to upgrade my characters and my ship and then seeing what I could do my next raid. It's kind of crazy just how much a little bit can improve a lot. So, no, I really enjoyed this game. I just wanted to talk about it because I've been playing it quite a bit. I did end up beating it and just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a relatively cheap game. I think it does a great job of taking strategy RPG, roguelite, and combining them into just a really fun experience. And I know I sort of knocked on the story a little bit, but it's actually relatively good. It kept me engaged anyway. In fact, this is going way longer than I wanted to. I really just wanted to talk about it briefly, just in case this game comes across your radar. Again, I played it on the PlayStation 5. Rogue Waters, it's a great game. If I was going to give it a number score, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. They don't make enough games like this, and especially in that pirate theme. I just felt like that's something that's been missed. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to me blab on about Rogue Waters. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on this game, or let me know what games you're playing right now, what games you'd like to see me review. Anything and everything is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.